Well, I don't know much of the surrender itself. I was in Alexandra Hospital. I'd been blown into a tree and had my face bashed somewhat. And while I was in there, we heard firing all round. And the next thing we knew, the Japanese were in the hospital. And it was chaos, believe me. I saw the results of it. Saw a friend of mine, the private deacon, been bayoneted on a stretcher outside the room where I was. And several of the doctors laying in the passageway being shot, and nurses. And this is not made up, this is actual truth. I actually saw this. Anyway, the Japs told us in the end, told us all to lay down, which we did on the floor. And the next day the Japanese came in, a senior officer, and apologised, if you will. And that night, everything went quiet, and we were told that the island of Singapore had surrendered. We couldn't believe it.
What happened to you?
Well, we were rounded up several days later and marched all the way to Changi. Changi village, nice place in peacetime, beautiful, near the beach. And we were all put in different huts and barracks, and there were several barracks in the area, all billeted down there. Thousands of us all marched down there and kept behind the barbed wire. They put barbed wire fences up, and we were told to wait there, which we did until we were posted to different places on working parties. From Changi, I was taken to a place called Adam Park, a residential area near the golf course in Singapore. And we were put up in these big houses. And each day we went out to the golf course and we dug it up, terrible, and made roads all across it that led to the centre where the Japanese built a big shrine to their war dead. And we worked on that 6 months, I should think. And then we were taken back to Changi, and very soon after that, we was all marched, or a big party of us marched down to the station in Singapore, put on a train. When I say train, I'm talking about an engine with loads of goods wagons, metal goods wagon. We packed in them 40 to a wagon for a 3-day journey to Thailand. And we were taken out at Thailand, put in a camp, which I know now is Tamakan. And the first work we had there was building the 2 bridges at the River Kwai. And I was there for all of 6 months. And finally I went to another place called Kinsayak, where we were building a railway cutting. As soon as you took the topsoil off, big granite stones, so they had to all be blasted out. And there's nothing worse than walking over blasted granite after it'd been blasted with dynamite with no shoes on your feet. We suffered there, believe me, very much so.
Tell me about Kwai, and did you have any contact with Japanese?
Oh, the Japanese were in charge. Yeah, they were in charge of the working. Sorry, yeah.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, the first thing in the camp every morning was Tenko, which you probably know from films, is roll call. And once the Japanese had decided among themselves how many there was there and whether we were all there, we split up into working parties, taken out. Some were on pile driving wooden piles into the bed of the river, and gradually a wooden bridge took shape to get the railway line over. And while they were finishing that off, we started building the other one, the concrete and steel bridge. And that was really hard work. When they put the bits of cement in, the cement bells in, we used to have to go inside them, dig the stuff into buckets that were chained up and tipped out, so the bell gradually sunk into the riverbed. And then once they got it far enough down, it was all filled with stones and cement on top as a block. And we gradually built all those piles across. And then the bridge that was brought to us, the steel spans, I believe came from Sumatra. And they was put up right across the river. But now the middle 2 are different, they're flat ones, they're not arched. That was blown. They were blown out by the Air Force in 1945, the centre ones.
Tell me about the living accommodations at Kwai.
Well, all the camps after we'd left Singapore were virtually the same. They built a frame of 2 side frames and an arch over the top, which are the basic, and they're dug into the ground for the length of the hut they want. And then you run bamboo from each archway right along, and then when you've tied all the bamboo and laced them all together, then you put atap, which is palm leaves, bent over a piece of bamboo and laced on, and they're laid one on top of the other like tiles. And believe me, they can be quite effective if they're laid on properly, keeping the rain out. And then inside the hut was a bamboo platform built right along the length of the hut. And you get bamboo and split it so it makes little flat pieces, and that was the piece that you laid on. That was laid at the whole length of the hut, and you were given so many inches each to lay on. Sometimes you got more room than others, depending on what camp you're in.
Did you know what was happening in the rest of the world? Did you have any?
We did get now and again little bits of here and there. They made a great thing, the Japanese, of telling us when the Duke of Kent was killed in his aircraft accident during the war. They thought that was great. Little did they know that we did have wirelesses.
So where did you go from after what happened? How did that period finish in Kwai?
Well, as I say, from when the bridge was almost complete, they were just finishing laying the rails. There was a different team laid the rails all the way up to what built the banks and the bridges. We were sent up then to Kinsaik, which was way up. And we walked all the way up there, by the way. And we started building, as I say, this cutting through a hill, which turned out to be all granite underneath. And that was pretty hard. But then one of the RMOs decided I had rheumatic fever, so he sent me back to Chiang Kai, which was a hospital camp. And luckily from there I went back to my own group, which was number 1 group, which I can say now without any fear or favour that was the best looked after group in the whole of the Thailand. For the sole reason, the chap in charge, the Lieutenant Colonel we had in charge, was a man named Philip Toosey, a territorial officer with the Royal Artillery. I don't know if you've read his book, The Man Behind the Bridge. I've got it at home now. And if you ever saw the picture of the bridge on the River Kwai that Alec Guinness took the part though. Little bit right, little bit wrong. He never wanted us to build the bridge. He taught us all ways to slow it down, Colonel Toosey. Great man. I've never met a man like him. And I mean that. Wonderful man. Well, when the war actually finished, we were in a place called Ubon, which is right over in the east of Thailand, near the border with Laos. And we went out one morning to go to work. Oh, we'd started digging a runway for an aerodrome halfway through it, and they made us dig big trenches across it. So we thought, well, they're going to have some funny aeroplanes land on here. And anyway, we realised that something must be happening. And one morning we was all lined up. Normal tanko, all counted. 1 or 2 got a box aside the ears because they wasn't standing up straight. And finally, we stood there for about an hour and wondered what the hell was going on. We all got our mess tin full of cold rice for our lunch. We was all told to sit down. Now that's unusual. You didn't get told to sit down very often. We was quite pleased. We looked at one another. We knew there was something going on by the way the Japs were acting. And after 2-3 hours, told all go back to the huts. Yasmi Day. Yasmi is rest. We all went back, glad of a day off. Next morning, paraded the same. Same thing happened. All men sit, all men go back to hut. Lovely. Another day off. That evening, we were all called out on the parade ground, all lined up, several hundred of us. And we had a chap who was our interpreter, his grandmother, I believe, was Japanese, although he was in our Royal Army Ordnance Corps. He was an interpreter. And Major Chida, Japanese commandant, stood up on his little box and gave a speech in Japanese, and then this chap interpreted. War in Southeast Asia is over. You're all going back to your families and all this. And I can honestly say, not one peep, not one cheer, nothing. Complete silence. After a while, it was just all men back to the huts. We all went back to the huts. Then you heard it. Rule Britannia, God save the King. You never heard such a cacophony of sound. Beautiful. And then all the Dakotas started landing. We've put in Dakotas and flown to Rangoon. Taken to a camp in Rangoon, and there were lovely tents there, all nice and clean, all put up. And we looked in there, and there were beds in there with sheets on them. White sheets on beds, you couldn't believe it. And to that day, to this, I just never know why. Some of the chaps couldn't get on the bed. They slept down beside on the ground. Couldn't get up on the bed. Couldn't bring us up to get on the bed. I tell you, I did. I was in there quicker than that. Yeah. But it was a wonderful sight. It really was.